Hey folks, johnfergusonsmart here. A question that I came across recently was, how do you handle traceability in Agile projects? How do you deal with ensuring, guaranteeing that each requirement that you define that's been asked for, requested by your product owners or your stakeholders, how do you ensure that that has been tested comprehensively if all you're doing is doing exploratory testing and that you're not really writing formal test cases with all the details? Well, the answer is there are several different facets to this, but the main answer is that the traceability in an Agile project, or especially where you're doing BDD, a proper BDD approach, is that the traceability comes from the requirements turned into an executable format, because you have a discussion, a conversation before you start a feature where you talk through the different flows. And it's a myth to say that acceptance criteria or high-level tests should only be happy paths. They cover the variations. They cover negative cases as well. They cover the what-ifs and the what-elses. They cover the positive and the negative. You can't understand the positive without understanding the negative. You need the light and the darkness, if you like. So when you're trying to understand requirements, when you're trying to understand what a feature should do, you have this conversation and you use very structured techniques like example mapping or feature mapping, and there are others, to understand exactly all of the variations that can happen. And this means if you have feature mapping, for example, you look at the flows through the application, the variations that can happen at each stage in that flow. Example mapping, you get a very big breadth focused image picture of what's going on, and you try and get a really detailed coverage of that understanding, but at a business level. So when you're thinking in terms of, here are the acceptance criteria, here are the requirements, here are the executable specifications that are derived from that requirements, you effectively have a set of business focused acceptance criteria and declarative effectively test cases, but they're really business focused acceptance criteria that can be verified, verifiable acceptance criteria, and that gives you a very high degree of coverage. But it's not quite all of your coverage. In practice, you may need a notch further down. You may need one more layer to go into the detail and test what happens if you do enter all sorts of weird characters, or what happens if you if you have some unexpected inputs or unexpected events that happen. What happens if a server is down, and so forth. All of that stuff gets tested at the layers underneath, either by exploratory testing or by integration testing, or sometimes you will have automated tests where a lower level of acceptance tests with a more fine-grained, more granular aspect to it. But they're not necessarily the top priority from the business perspective. From the business perspective, they want to know, can they do their job? Does the feature cover all of the use cases that they need to worry about, and all of the edge cases that they need to be concerned about? That's your higher top level of traceability, and everything underneath will just flesh that out. So with all of that, you don't need exhaustive manual test cases. Your executable acceptance criteria, your executable specifications, plus your exploratory testing will do just fine. Okay, that's all for today, folks.